why do we care what Gary Lineker said? He used to play football a long time ago. We're over that. And actually, if the public knew some of the horrible stuff that he gets up to behind closed doors, then people would stop listening to what he has to say. Unfortunately, he has much more expensive lawyers than I have, so I can't repeat on air the things that he gets up to. But if people knew.
Calvin, leftists are getting increasingly upset about Elon Musk's ownership of X, the app formerly known as Twitter. And of course, they're doing this thing that they always do, which is come close to quitting or threatening to quit. Do you remember all of the stuff like, oh, I'm not going to stay in the UK if Brexit happens? All of the celebrities said the same thing about Donald Trump in America. It doesn't happen. And the latest is Gary Lineker, who is the biggest gobshite on all of X. I think we can agree with that, even though it goes completely against the philosophy of the BBC and the fact that he is paid all of our license fee payer money and become really famous thanks to the BBC to express these views. But now he's saying that because of Elon Musk, he doesn't actually want to talk on Twitter, as he calls it. So he says, Calvin, I've changed my habits on Twitter. I don't really post my thoughts now because I think it has become not a very pleasurable experience. There was a time you could have little chats with people on there and a bit of banter, but now it is impossible because before I could have chats with people I either followed or were blue tick people, but now everyone's got a blue tick, so that doesn't work anymore. I've become a bit bored with it. It is a very unpleasant world, and Musk is clearly a very odd bloke. Yeah, you've got to be so odd, don't you, Calvin, to encourage freedom of speech. Do you know what's happened, Mr. Lineker? X is no longer your little left-wing echo chamber, and you don't like it because you're challenged. And how terrible that sometimes you're even challenged by ordinary folk without a blue tick. What did you make of this, Calvin?
Good, leave. But of course, you're right, they never do. They always threaten to leave. They always threaten to flounce off. He's not going to go anywhere because he loves the platform. He loves seeing his name out there. Every time he sees something controversial, the newspapers are all over it. Oh, Gary Lineker said, why do we care what Gary Lineker said? He used to play football a long time ago. We're over that. And actually, if the public knew some of the horrible stuff that he gets up to behind closed doors, then people will stop listening to what he has to say. Unfortunately, he has much more expensive lawyers than I have, so I can't repeat on air the things that he gets up to. But if people knew. However, these celebrities that are sick and tired of having ordinary folk tweet them because everyone's got a blue tick now. Well, good. What's wrong with a bit of meritocracy or equality? This is what they're always saying they're about, right? Equality of opportunities, equality of outcomes. Yeah, anyone can buy a blue tick now. You don't have to be some lefty liberal to get a blue tick. Surely that's a good thing. What, do you not want normal people talking to you? Why is that? Do normal people not share your opinions?
Yeah, indeed. And I do really like the fact, Calvin, that you pointed out that Lineker is a moral hypocrite, because trust me, he absolutely is. And where he's been very clever is ingratiating himself with key people within the mainstream media in order to shut down any critical reporting. So I saw it happen at my former employer, The Sun, where he's become incredibly close to its editor, Victoria Newton, feeds her lots of stories on other people, including stars of the BBC. And so as a result, she is slavish in her devotion to only running positive stories about Gary Lineker, which I find really hilarious.
It's almost like the mainstream media is corrupt and implicit in all the badness that goes on in the world.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Go with whoever pays them the best bucks or gets them the best stories.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, look, the thing that I just think, Calvin, about all of these people threatening to leave X, just go. You know, if you want to go, Alistair Campbell, if you want to go Gary Lineker, if you are that threatened by actually being part of a genuine, open, public square, then go off into your own little echo chambers again. But people like me and people like you, Calvin, have been putting up with leftist trolling and attacks on our free speech for years and years and years. And actually, it was only Elon Musk taking ownership of that app which made us feel safe, that we weren't going to be banned like Graham Linehan and Katie Hopkins and Tommy Robinson, who all found themselves deplatformed at the behest of little snowflakes like Gary Lineker, who couldn't handle an opinion, even though in many cases, Calvin, that opinion was simply to say that a trans woman is actually not a woman biologically. that got you back.
Isn't it? They just don't want a level playing field. And that's all Elon Musk has brought. He hasn't made Twitter far right or right wing. He's just allowed a level playing field that says anyone can have an opinion now, as long as it's not actual incitement to violence, as long as it doesn't break the rules. He said, we're not going to censor people just for being on the center right. And that's the way that social media should work. Unfortunately, the other platforms aren't quite the same. But if we have a level playing field, then we have open discussion, we have open debate, we can find out what people really think, and we can challenge each other, we can challenge our own ideas. That all sounds quite positive to me. But of course, all they want is an echo chamber of lefty lovies, the media elite and the establishment all patting each other on the back and saying how good they are for having open borders and raping society of all its resources. How great that is that people can't get a hospital appointment or a dentist appointment, or can't get their children to the local schools, or the churches are closing down and being sold into mosques. How wonderful our society is by being destroyed by the lefty liberal elites, because they're all sat there sipping champagne as the champagne socialists do, laughing at how good their life is while everyone else is being destroyed around them.
Totally true. And speaking of champagne socialists, Calvin, I've got to talk to you because it relates to X about this guy, Theo Usherwood. So do you remember he was a reporter, very Westminster bubble, sort of mainstream leftist liberal reporter who worked for LBC, and for some reason now seems to be constantly on GB News and Talk TV. But he appeared on the Sly News newspaper review just after this terror attack in Germany, and I posted an egregious clip on X which showed that his main concern was over the far right, not over the people who'd just been stabbed, the innocents, the fact that this was an illegal asylum seeker, the fact that ISIS was claiming responsibility. But no, his biggest concern was the fact that it could embolden the so-called far right. So this is the clip that I posted on X. This was on Saturday. It went viral. Watch.
When you look at something like this, you just really worry about how it could be used by those on the far right to stir up hatred, to look at this and say, well, here's the justification. This is why this will be jumped on by those on the far right to say, well, there's some justification to our cause, and that's concerning. And nobody, there's ISIS is a terrorist organization. This is plainly being treated as a terrorist attack, as it should be. And the police and authorities should be able to do their work and bring the perpetrator, whoever it might be, to justice. But I do, it is concerning, I think, that potentially the way, this could play out. We've seen the rise of the riots in Germany, particularly, but also in this country and across Europe as well.
Yasmin, I saw on social media earlier people saying, what did this person look like? Now, were they asking to do a public service so people keep an eye out if they are still at large? Or were they up to no good in asking that question?
No, and as Theo says, the whole riots thing and how it was instigated. And look, I'm a Muslim.
When you look at...
Now, Calvin, I found that whole exchange genuinely appalling. I wasn't attempting to stoke anything or take anything out of context or be irresponsible, but I thought it was absolutely critical to point out how the mainstream media think about these things. They are so deluded and so blinkered when it comes to the so-called scourge of the far right that actually they are more concerned about that than genuine Islamist terrorism. I mean, if you knew what had gone on in this German city, which Theo Usherwood did, to me it's absolutely impossible that that's how you could feel. This terrorist who was a Syrian, illegal, working for ISIS, Calvin, he literally went around with a massive knife and was slashing people specifically in the necks and their upper body because he was out to kill. And prosecutors have said he was out to kill Westerners because of an Islamist ideology. And he succeeded, Calvin, in killing 3 people. How can your concern after an incident be like that be about an imaginary far right in another country?
It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. First of all, for those 3 people who were killed, may light petrol shine upon them. And it's horrible that after their deaths, the mainstream media isn't praying for them or raising awareness. The mainstream media is painting a picture of a boogeyman who didn't commit the crime, who didn't perpetuate the crime. There was no far right criminal. This was clearly the opposite of that. And so they're painting a picture that doesn't help anyone, doesn't help society, doesn't help the victims, and it certainly doesn't help get the perpetrator locked up. But everything about that conversation annoyed me. So Yasmin Alibari Brown, for example, she's a well-known racist. Why is she on the platform to begin with? Well, because she's a Mohammedan, so she's able to offer an apologist viewpoint for the perpetrator. The presenter on Sly News wasn't asking questions to find answers. He was asking leading questions in order to further push their left-wing view. When he says things like, why were people asking what the perpetrator looked like? It's quite a natural question.
Because he's on the loose.
Absolutely.
I mean, seriously, imagine Lee Harvey Oswald just having murdered JFK in that assassination, and the police wouldn't release that this was a young white man. Don't be so ridiculous. This guy was on the loose. Of course you have to say what ethnic group he came from. No, I couldn't agree more.
Assumption is just wicked. But then also, of course, Theo, his whole perspective there was not anything to do with the victims, anything to do with the crime. No. It was he is exactly why we have so many grooming gang scandals in this country. His line of thinking that we must not let this out, we must not let people know the truth.
Yes.
Otherwise,
and look
they
away.
will see that diversity.
Look away because it might upset people and people might get angry. Exactly. Yeah. But first, you know what's so important about being independent is I only ever tell you about products that I use and believe will really improve your life. So that's why I am delighted today to talk about Verso. So let me tell you about my story in regards to this product. I entered my 40s, decided to get very healthy after a stressful year, exercising, trying to sleep better, all of that type of stuff, and doing the 16/8 fast as well. But I researched and found that scientists like David Sinclair have proven we can now reverse aging with interventions that go beyond healthy habits. So I was looking for a product that I knew would enhance everything I was already doing, but one that was backed up by really solid evidence. That product is Cell-Being by Verso. It's scientifically proven to include ingredients that fight the effects of aging by increasing NAD+ levels, which is the stuff that powers every cell in your body. I've been taking the product for a number of months. At the start of my day, it's been genuinely transformative. Fasting is easier. I've lost fat. I'm eating less too. And the team at Verso tell me that it's due to its blood sugar regulation effects, which lead to fewer cravings. It's also really helped my sleep. Verso publishes third-party testing from each batch produced, so you're guaranteed that you're getting exactly what you paid for, which is really important. And I'm delighted to say that because Verso is my first ever sponsor here on Outspoken, the brilliant deal continues today. If you head right now to buy.ver.so/outspoken, you will save 15% on your first order. All you need to do is use the coupon code Outspoken where you check out. The link is in our show notes on YouTube and Rumble, so you can click directly from there, or I'll spell it out for you, buy.ver.so/outspoken, and use the coupon code Outspoken. But Calvin, look, because this went viral all around the world and millions of people have seen that clip, thanks to me shining a light on it, I would have been happy to move on. Apart from the fact, Calvin, this dropkick, this loser Theo Usherwood, decided to go on to GB News last night, ironically my old show, and claim, Calvin, that I had in some way been intellectually dishonest in terms of the way that I presented the clip. So this is what he had to say about that. Let's watch along.
Terrible events in Germany. Terrible events in Germany.
Look, I just wanted you to
I appreciate it.
No,
I appreciate it.
I hope you do, because I don't mean this in a sinister way or anything at all.
No.
I don't want you to be able to come back to that, because I know you a bit, and I think the implication from that was, if you just look at that clip in isolation, that maybe the focus was, I hope this doesn't whip up the far right, as opposed to, what an awful terrorist attack this is.
Well, I called it a terrorist attack, and I condemned it as a terrorist attack. And actually, I'm not going to turn this into some sort of personal back and forth, but the clip was edited, and at the beginning of my exchange on Sky News, I called it a terrible event that had happened in Germany. So I'm unequivocal in the fact that what had happened was a terrible event. It was a terrorist attack, and it was unfairly clipped. And I pointed that out, and you can see that on my Twitter feed. The point of...
Calvin, it wasn't unfairly clipped. I will actually show you how briefly he said it was a terrible event. And what does a terrible event actually mean? Look at this.
Terrible events in Germany. 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 Terrible events.
So that was it. That was it.
He didn't even breathe between words. A terrible difference. Like he was struggling to say it. He didn't want to say it.
No, and he never pointed out that this was an Islamist attack.
Right, of course not.
And that we need to be concerned about the fact that this was committed by someone illegally in Germany. None of that. As soon as he moved on to the opinion, it became very clear that all he wanted to do was use this terrible terrorist attack to try and effectively bring down a bogeyman, the far right that doesn't even exist in this country, actually, because the people who he's referring to are just ordinary folk who are worried about their children or their husband or their wife being stabbed to death by an Islamist. Like, how on earth does that make you far right? But Calvin, I want to watch on, because then we're going to come to basically the most bizarre 3 minutes of television I've seen, where my successor on this GB News show literally lets this guy come up with the most bizarre explanation as to why he said what he said with absolutely no pushback. So let's watch along, Calvin.
The point I was making is that if you look at what ISIS, if you read the story, there's a story in the Sunday Express, and actually I've got Sunday Express, fine newspaper, and they just reported it factually, right? So I'm not making this is not a criticism of the Sunday Express at all. ISIS are referring to this individual, this suspect, as a soldier. It read like a recruiting leaflet for ISIS to say, here, if you do this, if you commit something like this, you're a hero, you're a soldier. But it also read, and ISIS don't care for Muslims. They have no, for law-abiding, and 99.999% of people, Muslim people, they have no truck with this, and ISIS don't care for them, and they don't care of any reprisal attacks. What they're trying to do is they are trying to pick away at the fabric of our society, the fabric of our democracy, and they're doing that by trying to provoke a reaction. And what they were doing, what that attack was about, is trying to provoke a reaction to have a two extremes, where it's ISIS or on the far right. No, and I don't care about ISIS, and I don't care about the far right. The people I care about, because I love this country, right? These are the people I care about, and I don't want to get dragged into this. And I'm sure everybody at GB News would share this sentiment. I care about, let's just deal with ISIS to start off with. Viewers, mate, I care about young Muslim men who might be at home, isolated, who might be on their computer screens watching YouTube, and they might see this and think, actually, I want to be a hero too. I want to be a soldier too. So I'm going to go and copy this. And I also care about young white working class men who might be at home, and they might get a message on their phone, a WhatsApp or a Telegram, saying, look at what happened in Germany. Well, why don't you do something about it? Because if you don't do something about it, nobody will do anything about it. Why don't you come down? We're going to go and protest down at a hotel of asylum seekers. Why don't we go and have it might get a bit rowdy. Why don't you come down and join us at that hotel and we'll throw something at the police, or we'll try and set fire to it. We're going to take the law into our own hands. Germany, this country, we are modern, mature democracies with effective intelligence services, effective police forces, effective judicial systems. The only response to an attack like this is to let those agencies get on with the job and bring individuals to justice. And if you're a young man and you're seeing that WhatsApp from a member of the far right, and you're saying, come down and take part in this, and you go and take part in that you go and take part in that right, you're a member of the far right and you're a racist. But if you make the decision that actually that isn't the answer, that's not the way to do things, and actually you're a law-abiding citizen, and yes, you're worried about immigration, and yes, you're worried about the fact we're spending £7 million a day on asylum seeker hotels, and yes, you're worried about the fact that there are small boats crossings. You could be worried about all those things, but if you stay at home and you say, actually, I'm not going to take part in the violence, I'm not going to go and attack a hotel, I'm not going to go and throw stuff at the police, then you're not a racist, and you're not a member of the far right.
In a legitimate way.
And you can voice in a legitimate way.
Absolutely. Yeah, fair enough. Theo, look, thank you. I
hope that clears it up.
Well, I think it does, and thank you.
Really? Really?
It clears it up. In what way does it clear it up?
I didn't take that out of context, just to be clear. I had to play you that full horror show.
Right.
I mean, not only is the guy being intellectually dishonest, but I actually think he's proving my point, because yet again, he's creating some sort of bogeyman and effectively saying that Brits should just sit back and do absolutely nothing and trust the authorities that have let us down for years and years and years. And that's different between going out and firebombing a hotel. There's a happy medium there, Calvin.
This guy is clearly delusional. He thinks that terrorists attack our country or any country in order to provoke the far right. What? First of all, there is no far right in the United Kingdom. Secondly, terrorists attack because they want to terrorize, they want to destroy, they do not like our way of life, and that's why they attack us. They're not provoking the far right. And if people get upset with what's going on, that doesn't make them far right. He's really creating this boogeyman in his head. He's got this scenario where, oh my gosh, if they find out it was a Mohammedan, they're going to go down and attack hotels. Like, who's doing that? Who's suggesting that? Where's he getting these ideas from? And when he said in his original clip that, the far right are going to be jumping on this, well, I get called far right all the time. And yes, I am jumping on this because he is part of the problem. People are getting stabbed to death. People are dying because of people like him being complicit, attempting to cover it up, not wanting the true details out there because they're afraid of this boogeyman of the far right. And if they continue down this path, there will be a far right because the pendulum will swing so far in the other direction that we will have people standing up and getting violent. That's what we all want to avoid. So people like Theo are the problem.
And we do know, by the way, that people are entering this country illegally, that they are raping our women. We know that is a fact. Some of them are trying to kill us. That is a fact. And if you look at the time that the MI5 devotes to Islamic extremism versus so-called far-right terrorism, it doesn't even compare. It doesn't even compare. So I don't think Theo Usherwood clarified anything there. I think it very much speaks to the downfall of our former employer, that he is now the type of commentator they want to employ, just like he's the type of guy that goes on Sly News and parrots this sort of rubbish. And I think it's really disappointing, the whole thing. But as I say, I wouldn't have done that unless he had just claimed on national television that I had taken something out of context. No, they are your words. You stand by them just like I stand by everything that I say on this show. And if I'm posting a clip that's 1 minute, 8 seconds long and contains absolutely no edits whatsoever, I am not taking you out of context. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.